even in fictional books, because heroes were main characters. And that kind of thing just didn't happen to main characters. She weakly backed away from the Dragon King, who was licking his lips. Dragons, a giant, goblins, not to mention magic towers and good turned evil magicians. This was a dream. That was the only possible explanation. This was all a dream because she had said no to Owen and felt guilty. The had to be a dream albino red dragon caught sight of her from the air, then dove down, its talons spread in anticipation. The roar of the attacking dragon tore through her body, and almost without thinking about it, she leaped out of the way a moment before those enormous claws ripped through the earth where she had been standing. The dragon screamed in rage, then pulled back into the sky, circling around for another pass. The Golden Dragon King finally noticed her as well and began to gallop toward her, all 16 legs moving at once. And the teethy, creepy little goblins kept swarming off the tower. "Run!" her mind screamed at her. "Get out of here! This is real, you idiot! Whether you want it to be or not, this is real and you're going to get eaten, just like Keel. And if you die, Owen will be stuck in that nowhere prison forever." She pushed herself to her feet and began to run from the Dragon King, only to throw herself out of the way of the diving albino red again as the goblins raced after her in the ever-growing swarm. Where was she supposed to go? For now, this was all behind the invisibility curtain, but if she ran away from the tower, the entire town would see what was happening. Wait, the invisibility curtain? Wasn't that supposed to have disappeared if Keel had fallen asleep? Wasn't being eaten worse than sleeping? She dodged an albino dragon strike, only to get tossed to the ground by one of the Dragon King's 16-clawed feet. It roared, raising its head over her to attack. And then it froze, an odd expression on its face. "I hate being eaten," shouted a muffled voice. And then, slowly, the Dragon King's jaws began to push open, revealing a very slimy, very annoyed Keel Gnomenfoot. "You have no ideas how many times this has happened," he told Bethany in disgust. "You always forget that smell." With that, he leaped out of the dragon's mouth, a step ahead of the jaws snapping close, landing right beside her on the ground. "Oh, I'll tell you what, nothing in the world wakes you up like the smell of a dragon's stomach. Nothing!" Bethany just stared at him as he gestured with both hands, and new magic wands appeared in them. He quickly aimed one of the tiger at the golden tiger, which shrank to the size of a mouse. The other wand shot some sort of magical energy into the sky, wrapping the albino red's wings around its body and sending it crashing to the ground. "Keel," she said, "you're alive!" 42, he said with a grimace. "That's how many times I've been eaten." "Well, 43 now," he grinned. "Don't let me have all that fun here. Book girl, get in on this." Despite the dragons, the tower, the magister, the giant, and everything, Bethany just had to smile. "You're insane, Keel Gnomenfoot." "And that's why everybody loves me," he said with a wink. "Now do what the fiction thing you do. It'll be fun." "But I don't have any books." "Weren't there a whole bunch in the house right there?" Keel said. They ran over to the crashed albino red dragon, which was trying to right itself. Keel climbed onto its back and kicked its sides with its heel. "Up, dragon! I need a better view of things. The dragon roared and snapped its jaws at him, but immediately stopped, a red glow surrounding its head. Instantly, the dragon calmed down and then leaped back into the air, a laughing, still slimy keel on his back. Can you imagine riding a dragon? Bethany watched him take off for a second, then gasped at the wave of goblins that came barreling toward her. She turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, toward Jonathan Porterhouse's mansion, just hoping the front door was still unlocked. It wasn't. But when she turned around to find another way in, 3 goblins leaped at her, missed, and hit the door instead. The door collapsed inward, giving her a way in. "Thanks," she told the goblins as she jumped over them, feeling a weird surge of energy, like she had too much caffeine. Where was all this coming from? This was the worst thing that had ever happened to anyone ever, and part of her was enjoying it. The entryway still had a large blackened spot where the magister had blown up the empty journal he thought that they were jumping into. She skidded around the spot and ran as fast as she could for the library. There wouldn't be time to find the correct books that the dragons, goblins, and giant all came from, and it was altogether possible that the magister had those in his tower anyway, since he'd freed the characters to begin with. Still, with as many books as the library had, there would have to be a good one to find for something useful. She threw open the doors of the library and came to a complete stop. The shelves were empty. Of the thousands and thousands of books, Bethany saw just 2 scattered on the floor, forgotten. The magnitude of what this meant hit Bethany like a rock, and for a brief second, she considered just laying down and giving up. Then she remembered the teeth of the goblins chasing her, and she slammed the door instead, focusing on the remaining 2 books. She grabbed the only options that spread out on the library's desk in front of her. Oh my gosh, this had to be a joke. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and a large leather-bound copy of Emma by Jane Austen. A book about a submarine fighting a giant squid, and one about an English matchmaker in the 1800s. I mean, seriously? The library doors burst open, and a horde of goblins scrambled through, coming right at her. They splittered, leading the way. She ducked behind the desk, but they leaped over her, arms outstretched for her. "Fine! You get 19th century romance," she shouted, and then she smashed the nearest goblin over the head with Emma. Another one jumped at her, and it cut Jane Austen too. "Who's next?" Bethany shouted, smashing goblins in the face over and over with the book cover. You want some of this too?" The goblins circled around, surrounding her. They swarmed up and over her arms, pulling her down to the ground, teeth everywhere. She kicked and growled, then turned to the other weapon, pulling random pages out of 20,000 Leagues. Instead of jumping in, though, she just stuck a hand in and pulled out whatever she could feel. A gush of water felt like a fire hose exploded from the first page, right into the nearest group of goblins. Bethany scrambled back to her feet, then pushed her hand into the second page, pulling out more of the ocean. Then the third page and the fourth. Soon the entire room was filled with a good inch or 2 of water. Through each page immediately stopped shooting water as soon as she dropped it. The force of the ocean spitting out of the tiny pages was enough to send all the goblins flying. There were a little unconscious, toothy goblins everywhere, and a few remaining ones that were easily cleaned up with a little Emma. Bethany dropped to the wet floor, breathing so hard she thought she might faint. Was this what it was like being in fictional? Doing crazy things just to keep alive? Not even caring about the consequences? She glanced around at the former library, now aquarium, of Jonathan Porterhouse's mansion. There were even a few fish flipping around. Fictional fish, which was very, very odd. Finally, Bethany took a deep breath and stood back up. She grabbed her 2 weapons and then went back out to see how Keel was doing. As she emerged outside, something enormous with laces slapped onto the ground just in front of her. She looked up, and then up some more, to where a giant, easily as tall as the tower, held Keel and his dragon tightly in a fist, keeping either from moving. "Oh, hi!" Keel shouted. "I hope you found something good in there, because things took a slight turn out here. Nothing I can't handle, of course, but I'll let you help me if it makes you feel better." That's the end of chapter 27.